So was that $1.5 trillion well spent? And are we safer today than we were before 9/11?
I knew why, because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Starting with Iraq and then Syria.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
Syria, Lebanon.
Saudi Arabia has been accused of declaring war on Lebanon. The strong words come from the leader of Lebanon's Hezbollah political and militant group.
Libya.
That's why the United States has worked with our allies and partners to shape a strong international response at the United Nations. Our focus has been clear: protecting innocent civilians within Libya and holding the Gaddafi regime accountable.
Libya, Somalia.
So, what we discussed was the importance of, number one, continuing the effort to root out al-Shabaab's capacity inside of Somalia.
Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and
As the threat of a civil war looms over the world's newest country, the U.S. is moving additional Marines and aircraft to South Sudan, raising the number of U.S. troops in the region to 150.
Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
The war of words between President Trump and Iran is escalating. The president slammed Iran's leader Hassan Rouhani on Twitter yesterday, saying, quote, "Never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before."
This comes after Rouhani warned the United States in a speech Sunday that any conflict with Iran would be, quote, "mother of all wars."
Life in Raqqa. $230 million was recently allocated to try and repair places like Raqqa in the war-torn parts of Syria, but State Department officials are saying they will not repair the city, and that money is probably going to be used elsewhere, at least until further notice. And then there's the question of money that was used, billions of dollars that was spent to try and train some of the Syrian rebels to fight for the U.S. cause. The actual number, it turns out, that were trained is embarrassingly slight, as we learn in the Senate hearing where a general not long ago was asked, how many did we actually train with this money?
Can you tell us what the total number of trained fighters remains?
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five.
4 or 5, not 400. Not 500, not 4,000 or 5,000, 4 or 5 people. Somebody was trained. That's what we have to show for the billions of dollars that were spent under the heading of Syrian military training.
Let's bring in Colonel David Hunt. He is retired.